This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
Back to Greg's story. According to multiple sources, if Kraft comes to the realization, and this is the line that I ganked and posted on Twitter, according to multiple sources, if Kraft comes to the realization he made the wrong choice with Mayo, he would not, I stress, would not hesitate to rectify the situation. So, Greg, the thoughts that, hey, man, Kraft put Mayo there. Owners don't like to be wrong. If he fires Mayo after year one, it's egg on Kraft's face. You say fans should not necessarily be too concerned about that.
Yes. However, I think that I don't think it's tough for us to realize that Robert is sentimental, to say the least, when it comes to certain things. I know this is something that I've heard for multiple months, that Robert, if he deems this to be a mistake, and I don't know whether it's risen to that level at this point. I don't think it has. But again, this is why the final 4 games are important. I mean, if they go out losing, I think would it be 6 in a row? No, it would be 7 in a row that they would lose. Yeah, they lost 6 in a row early on in the season. This would be 7 straight games to finish the season. 3-14, worst record since Dick McPherson in 1992. Their point differential could be along those same lines. It could be worse than last year if this final 4 games go poorly. I know people believe that that's the case, that Robert would not hesitate. In actuality, would he actually pull the plug? I think that's where, and I understand there are people who have a hard time seeing that, and quite frankly, so do I. But that's why a lot of it depends on how these final 4 games. I mean, if they're getting if they get their doors blown off in the final 4 weeks, and they've lost 7 straight to finish the year, it could get into that territory. I don't think it's close to that right now, but it could get there.
One of the questions I got on Twitter was like, why now? It took them this long to figure this out. Like now they're worried about Mayo. Not necessarily. Greg writes about this in his story. He says, doubt about Mayo's staying power did not just come on in the past few weeks. During the offseason, ownership had some concerns that Mayo was in over his head and not focused on the right things to build a football program. Add to that, Greg.
Yeah, I think you're talking about an ownership group that inherited Bill Parcells, that hired Pete Carroll, that hired Bill Belichick. These are guys who were all former head coaches before they were coaches here. They had a history of being successful coordinators in the NFL, and they all three, even though you could argue with Carroll how successful he was here, but there's no question that they had a vision. And they knew what they wanted. And they also had football acumen in terms of, being able to get the team in the best position to win each week. And I think that aspect for Mayo has been underwhelming to the Krafts. I mean, just put yourself in their shoes. Those 3 coaches, they're all going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So they know what it looks like. They know how they've operated. They know how they got to, be successful. Parcells and Belichick, we know about. Pete Carroll, he was around 500 in his 3 years here. You could understand that if Jerod Mayo didn't come with the forethought, the vision of his football program, that it wouldn't take the Krafts long to be like, wait a minute, this is not like we've seen before, and right. I don't know if this is going to be successful for us.
More on the idea of the Krafts being alarmed. Greg, you said it really started to kick in when the team started at 1-6. And then you explained that, I think you touched on this a little bit in a prior podcast, but this idea that the Krafts started to kind of dig in to what went wrong last year in the building and what was Mayo's role within the fracture of that program. And certainly you can add more detail to that. But my question is, why did that not happen before officially naming Jerod Mayo the head coach of the New England Patriots?
Yeah, I think they were more preoccupied with the end game with Bill. And that's, to me, it's understandable. I mean, because we're talking about just a almost an otherworldly presence in terms of Bill and success, and how he's going to be the greatest coach of all time. And like, I think they were more preoccupied with the elegant solution at the end and parting ways with Bill, and maybe even a little bit, can this be repaired? Can they get the train on the tracks if they do X, Y, and Z? And so I don't think they really delved into what was going on inside the building. And I do think those communications, where, I'm not going to call them calls, I'm not going to call them meetings, I'm going to just say communications, which Mike Giardi also had really good reporting on BSJ the day before to talk about, like, that Jonathan, there are NFL people that believe Jonathan was at the heart of a lot of these communications, as far as the direction of the team, and it not only included, it was reported at the time by Bert that they were having communications about how's the best way to support a young quarterback. That wasn't just what the communications was about. It was about May, but it was also about Mayo. It was also about doing a little bit of background on Mayo, because I think they had heard some rumblings about, his role on the coaching staff in the previous year or two.
Right.
Can Mayo be, they were doing some research on, can Mayo be successful? How can they help him, which I think will be their preference going forward, is to retain Mayo. And how do they better support him, that they failed him a little bit in that regard. And so those communications were all encompassing. It wasn't just about Drake May.
You then mentioned, Greg, that, the situation the Patriots are currently in, you've got Drake May, a top 3 pick, hopefully, certainly looks like a top 5 pick, fingers crossed, a bunch of cap space, the new football ops building that is going to become, an actual thing that exists by 2026. You think that the New England job, if the Krafts actually made the move and said goodbye to Mayo, that this Patriots gig would be, according to you, by far the most attractive job out there, which leads us to, if you move on from Mayo, what would you do? And I think a lot of people are thinking of the same guy. It's a guy that you bring up, and that's Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, I think that especially Jonathan thinks a lot about it, and I think you can probably pull quotes. I remember him commenting on Vrabel as a head coach. I don't know if it was around the Hall of Fame thing or whatnot, but everyone knows Mike Vrabel is an excellent coach. He's an excellent tactician. You could certainly quibble with if you want to put the personnel choices in Tennessee on him, even though whether it was Robinson or the guy that's there now, Rand Carthon, they were in charge of personnel, and also his offensive approach, and that's fine. But I think that if there wasn't a Mike, because we all know that Vrabel was available at this time last year, and you're just like, how do you not talk to him? How do you just promote Jerod Mayo? And okay, they wanted to honor their word to Jerod Mayo. And they probably figured at that point in time, well, we lost our opportunity from Vrabel, and we'll have to see if it bites us in the butt. And then all of a sudden, he's still out there, and he's available again in year 2, and you're staring at it, and you're saying, like, I mean, you really have to answer the question, like, do you think Jerod Mayo is going to be a good coach? Do you think coaches develop over time and become good coaches? Because if there's any doubt about that, if there's a lot of doubt about that, Mike Vrabel is plug and play, and he understands the environment. He understands the Krafts. He understands all that. And plus the specter of, he could land with the New York Jets, and he could be there twice a year for how long, and rub his butt in your face every time he plays the Jets. I mean, I do think that complicates the situation. And again, I do think, and this is the premise of the whole article, Mayo needs to have not a strong. He needs to have a good, solid close to the season.